Hi, everyone. This week, I want to talk about paragraph development and literary response. So this will take what we talked about last week as far as a thesis statement, and an introduction, and it'll tell us where do we go next? How do I organize my ideas in my paper? And how do I formulate a solid body paragraph once I start doing so? While this general format can be really beneficial when writing any type of paper, and we'll refer back to this with major paper 3, it's really beneficial with this literary response, which will give us our first experience with citation and using source material. So let's get started. So in paragraph development, what that means is how do I introduce my ideas to my readers? How do I support them with evidence? And how do I defend those ideas? And then how do I transition to other ideas? Um, one thing that helps me one thing that helps for me to keep in mind is pretending like my readers have no idea what I'm talking about. So when you're writing this literary analysis or literary response, you're going to want to pretend like your readers have never read Claudia Lev Meyer's book. They've never even heard of it. And therefore, they're relying on you to tell them not just what the book says, but how you're interpreting it. The bulk of the writing of this paper should be from you, not from your sources, not from the book. The type of paragraph that you'll use in this type of paper is called an illustration paragraph. An illustration paragraph starts with a general point or a general idea, and then it's supported or illustrated with specific examples in order to back up what you're saying with that general support or that general point. Before we go into that, let's talk about the difference between specific and general. General statements are broad statements and points. Basically, they're umbrella statements. They go overall and they talk about different things. They're a little bit looser and they aren't very exact. They're just used to set up a point. Something like decorations can make an office feel like home. Learning to write well takes hard work. They make a point, they're an idea, but they don't really explain that idea. They just introduce it. Specific points, those are used to support general ideas. So if I say decorations can make an office feel like home, then I could say photos of loved ones, glass domed lamps, paintings of watercolor designs and hand lettered art, and collectible toys make my office feel more like a home away from home. Learning to write well takes hard work, which is general. English grammar has a lot of rules that can be hard to remember, such as comma placement, avoiding run-on sentences, and consistent verb tenses. But through practice, the rules can become second nature. So there I have some more specific examples that are backing up those general points. Doesn't mean that the general points are bad, they just need some specific points to back them up. However, you want to avoid trying to support a general statement with more general statements. So you want to avoid something like math is difficult. I find math hard. Math presents me with a lot of challenges. Whereas, it seems like it would emphasize the point. It doesn't really support it because you're just kind of saying the same type of general thing over and over. Instead, I would say something like math is difficult. It requires memorizing a lot of formulas and the ability to fully understand when to apply them. Those are some more specific points that can back up that general point. In literary discussion, general statements are thought of as a topic sentence for a paragraph, and specific statements provide the support for those topic sentences, or the specific statements become the bulk of the paragraph, whereas the general statement is typically 1 to 2 sentences in each paragraph. I like to think of this as the T method. T for topic sentence, E for evidence, A for analysis of that evidence, and in this order. If you do that in every body paragraph, then you typically have some well-written, well thought out, and well-organized body paragraphs in your paper. The topic sentence, the first ones of these is it's one of the categories from the thesis statement. So when we talked about the thesis statement last week, we talked about how a thesis statement sets up your point and then talks about 3 different ways or categories that point or topic or theme finds its way or appears in Claudia Love Meyer's book. That's also what we're looking at here. A topic sentence is a mini thesis statement for the paragraph. It takes one of those categories, and it's the first sentence in each body paragraph. If it doesn't fit that topic sentence, it doesn't go in the paragraph. So a well thought out topic sentence will help keep your paper organized and well structured. Once you decide on your topic, you'll list different ways a topic is used in the book. You'll select 3 of those and then add them to your thesis statement, like we talked about last time. And then each of these 3 will become a topic sentence. An example. So let's say I'm looking at the theme of falling from Claudia Love Meyer's book. I'll make a list of ways that the theme of falling appears. I'll talk about the physical fall that Kamau undergoes when he jumps off the top of the roof of Rupp Arena. I'll talk about metaphorical falling, as in falling into mental illness. I may talk about the title of the text. I could talk about like falling as far as like falling for other people, falling out of love. I could talk about Claudia's own falling into mental illness or Kamau's falling into mental illness. And then I could talk about how it's used through poetry. I'll make that list and then I'll decide that in my paper, I want to talk about physically falling, metaphorical falling, and then falling is brought about through poetry. And each of those then will become its own paragraph. And with each of that paragraph, I'll have a topic sentence. And we'll look at an example of a paragraph that has all of these. Evidence is the second part. So once you have your topic sentence, the evidence is specific times the topic from that topic sentence appears in the text. You can have quotes, which are when you take the exact words from the book and you put them in quotation marks. The only time you use quotation marks is if they're exact words from the book. And quotation marks become a signal to your reader that everything in these marks are exact words from my source material or from Claudia Love Meyer's book in this case. Summaries are when you take a long passage and you put it into your own words in a sentence or 2. So let's say I want to talk about something that happens over like 3 or 4 pages. I'm talking about a hospital stay or something like that. But I really just want to talk about the main ideas. I would just summarize the main ideas in my own words. Or I can paraphrase, which is when I take a sentence or 2 from the text and I put it in my own words, and it's roughly the same length as it was in the original text. I just wanted to use my words. And then you'll add page numbers as well. They go in parentheses at the end of each sentence when the text is referred to, and we'll use those for citation. You don't have to worry about citation for now. We'll talk about that in a future week, but that is why I ask you to put the page numbers down when you do your reader response journals. So when you go to write this paper, your citation, you just have to kind of go back through your journal and plug it in instead of having to search back through the book to find a page. So some examples. So let's say I'm looking at the subtopic or one of my 3 categories for my thesis of falling in poetry. And I'm going to just use the quote, "Don't you fall now, honey, because I still clummin', and life for me ain't been no crystal stair." Meyer in parentheses. And then I'd put this period after Meyer if it was within the text of a book. Because it's from the epigraph, there's no page number. If it was found within the pages of the book, it would say Meyer 76 or whatever page number it's on. And we'll go over that again, like I said, when we talk about the book, when we talk about citation. But that's all you do for the example. The example is just where you bring in that material from the text. And then you have analysis, or the A. This is when you are interpreting, analyzing, or explaining how the evidence connects to your topic sentence. Remember, you're pretending like your reader has never read the book, or even if they have, they may be experiencing the book in a different way. We all bring our own experiences to a text, our own expertise, our own outside interests. So we all read it in a slightly different way. Your job here is to explain to the reader how you're reading it, how you're interpreting and analyzing the book. Um, I've read this book several times, and I'm always amazed when I'm always amazed when I read students' work and I see it in a different way. So you're also explaining to me how you're reading it, which gives me a new way of reading a book that I really enjoy. It should be at least as long, if not longer, than the evidence. The reader wants to read your interpretation of the book, not a summary of the book. Um, if that was the case, they would just read the text itself, the book itself. Your job is to, the reader, by reading your paper, they want to know how you're reading it, how you're approaching it. So let's look at an example of a body paragraph like I would write for this paper. Before going to the next, I would pause. After I read this, I'll ask you all to pause it and see if you can figure out where the topic sentence is, where the evidence is, and where the analysis is. Meyer uses lines from Langston Hughes's poem, Mother to Son, to introduce the theme of falling in Don't You Fall Now. Now, don't you fall now, honey, because I still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair, Meyer. From the opening pages, we are introduced to a mother desperate to save her son from falling. Meyer becomes the mother from Hughes's poem, and we can understand before we even read the text how she wants to take her son's struggles as her own and possibly wants to prevent him from falling just how she once did. That theme of her son falling and her fear of being unable to save him becomes the backbone of her memoir. So pause here, see if you can pick out the thesis statement or the topic sentence, the topic sentence, the evidence, and the analysis. And here's it broken down. Let me move my picture over so you can see the key. It's not going to let me move it, sorry. So in yellow, you'll have the topic sentence. Meyer uses lines from a Langston Hughes poem, Mother to Son, to introduce the theme of falling and Don't You Fall Now. So that tells my reader that everything in this paragraph is going to have to do with how the poem is used to introduce the theme of falling. That means that I'm not going to talk about anything that doesn't relate to the poem or how the poem is used. I'm not going to talk about mental illness or anything like that here. I'm focusing just on the poem and just on the theme of falling. Or just as how falling is used in the poem to set up the theme in the text. The evidence is that quote from the poem. And then my analysis is how I'm explaining the significance of the evidence. I'm saying that it sets up this idea that she's trying to keep her son from falling and she's trying to keep climbing to try to save him. And maybe she's worried that he's going to fall like she did. And she's probably also trying to keep herself from falling. Some things to keep in mind: you can use more than one piece of evidence for each paragraph. You just want to add some analysis in between. So instead of TEA, it would be TEAEA. If you just use back-to-back quotes, then your reader's not going to understand how you're using and applying the quotes. So you want to make sure there's some analysis in between the quotes each time they're used. If you're using a lot of evidence and analysis, so when I want to talk about metaphorically falling, maybe I want to break that down even more into Claudia Love Meyer's fall into mental illness, and then also her son's early signs as he's falling into mental illness. So it might be broken and I might break that down into more than one paragraph. The topic sentence for the second paragraph needs to clarify that the paragraph is connected to the one before it instead of moving on to a different topic. So if I was going to talk about poetry again, Meyer continues to discuss falling through poetry later in the text. That just says that I'm still talking about poetry, about the theme of falling through poetry. Basically, it's just a way to make sure that your reader can understand and follow along easily with what you're doing. Hope that clarifies some paragraph structure. We'll do an activity for that this week. And if you have any questions, as always, please reach out and let me know. And I look forward to seeing what you're working on. Have a good one. Bye.